The shrill sound of a phone shattered the silence at 2 a.m., pulling Emily from sleep like a jolt of electricity. She turned to see Daniel's phone glowing on the nightstand, vibrating again and again, the name on the screen unfamiliar. Emily whispered, "Daniel, your phone," but he stirred only faintly, rolling away, leaving her staring at the light like it was a threat. Curiosity clawed at her, heart pounding as she reached out, fingers trembling. The call ended, replaced by a message notification, and she froze at the words. "When will you be home? The kids miss you." Her stomach tightened, confusion blooming into terror. She nudged Daniel harder, her voice sharp. "Who's messaging you like this?" His eyes fluttered open, annoyance flashing before he grabbed the phone, muttering, "It's work, Emily, go back to sleep." The tone was too cold, too rehearsed, and her chest ached with the sharp sting of distrust. Shadows stretched across the bedroom walls from the streetlight outside, framing the moment like a scene she wasn't meant to witness. Emily sat upright, breath shallow, mind racing with questions she couldn't form into words. Daniel pulled the blanket tighter around himself, phone clutched in his palm, leaving her staring into the dark, already sensing her world was about to break. Emily sat on the edge of the bed long after the phone went quiet, her chest heavy with dread. The shadows no longer felt still. They pressed closer, whispering doubts she couldn't silence. She pressed her palms against her face, trying to convince herself it was nothing, yet the message burned in her mind like fire. Daniel's steady breathing behind her felt staged, his stillness too perfect, as though he were pretending to sleep. She turned slowly, watching the way his fingers curled protectively around the phone. Emily whispered, "You never keep it that close." The words carried no weight, swallowed by the silence. Memories of late nights and strange excuses rushed back, knitting together into something that now felt undeniable. She thought of his recent distance, his long absences explained away with ease, and she felt the fragile trust unravel. The silence became unbearable, every tick of the clock hammering into her skull. She wrapped her arms around herself, the room suddenly colder than it had ever been. When morning came, Emily forced herself into routine, though her body felt heavy with unspoken dread. She brewed coffee, hands trembling as the machine sputtered, filling the silence with hisses. Daniel entered, neatly dressed, smiled too casual, and said, "Rough night?" She searched his face, trying to find cracks beneath the smooth mask, but his eyes darted away too quickly. "Who was calling at 2 in the morning?" she asked, voice flat. He chuckled lightly, dismissive. "Work, I told you." The answer slid across her like oil, impossible to grip. She nodded weakly, but her chest tightened as though her heart refused the lie. He kissed her cheek before leaving, his lips cold, the gesture mechanical. The sound of the door shutting echoed, leaving Emily alone with the weight of suspicion that settled like a shadow over the kitchen. Emily stood at the window watching Daniel's car pull away, her breath fogging the glass. Her reflection stared back, pale and uncertain, the faint lines of worry deepening. She whispered, "Work doesn't text about kids missing you." The words filled the empty room, more real spoken aloud. Her hand pressed against the glass, as if reaching for answers beyond. Memories of laughter, promises, and his gentle touch clashed violently with the image of him clutching the phone in the night. Her chest ached with betrayal not yet proven, but already felt. She turned sharply, as if expecting to see evidence lying in the open, but the house remained silent, spotless, indifferent to her turmoil. By evening, the unease had grown unbearable, pressing on Emily's chest like a weight. She sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, debating calling her sister. Finally, she whispered into the receiver, "I think something's wrong with Daniel." Her sister's voice came through warm but uncertain, "You're probably overthinking, Anne." The reassurance felt hollow, unable to smother the memory of the message. Emily closed her eyes, tears burning but refusing to fall. "No," she said quietly. "This feels different." The silence that followed was heavy, both women afraid to speak the truth aloud. Emily lingered in the living room, staring at the muted glow of the morning sun slipping across the carpet, her chest heavy with unspoken fear. She whispered, Maybe I'm imagining things, but the words rang hollow, brittle like glass about to crack. The coffee table still held remnants of last night's uneaten dinner, each plate a reminder of his growing distance. Daniel entered, adjusting his tie, his face polished with that familiar charm. "Big day ahead," he said, voice bright, but his eyes barely touched hers. Emily smiled faintly, her heart clinging to fragments of who he once was. Yet doubt gnawed at her. He kissed her forehead, the gesture tender in appearance, but empty in weight, and her chest constricted as if something vital had been stolen. She thought of how much of her identity was tied to him, of the years she'd trusted his promises without question, and the cracks in her foundation widened with every passing moment. Later, Emily walked past Daniel's office downtown, unplanned but pulled by an invisible thread of suspicion. The tall glass building shimmered in the sun, each reflection blinding like secrets she couldn't grasp. Through the window, she glimpsed him laughing with coworkers, his posture relaxed, his smile too natural to be the mask she saw at home. She froze, heart hammering, whispering to herself, "How can he look so different here?" Her hands trembled as she pressed them against her bag, torn between bursting inside and running away. Daniel waved casually at someone across the room, radiating warmth, as though the man she lived with and this version were two different souls. The dissonance left her dizzy, a crack widening between the life she believed in and the one she was witnessing. That evening, Emily sat across from her sister Claire in a bustling cafe, the noise around them blending into a haze. She clutched her cup tightly, voice trembling as she said, "He's hiding something, I feel it." Claire leaned forward, her face lined with concern, whispering, "You've always trusted him. Maybe it's just stress." The words stung, as though her pain had been reduced to imagination. Emily shook her head, eyes glassy. "A message came last night, about kids missing him." Claire's mouth parted in shock before soft denial returned. "That doesn't make sense. Maybe it was a mistake." Emily lowered her gaze, anger mixing with despair, realizing even those closest to her couldn't see the storm raging within. Back home, Emily wandered into the bedroom, clutching an old photo album, as though it could anchor her against unraveling trust. She traced her fingers over pictures of her and Daniel smiling, their younger selves radiant with joy and certainty. Tears welled as she whispered, "Where did that man go?" The silence offered no answer, only the heavy weight of memories that now felt like lies carved in paper. She sank onto the bed, the photo slipping from her grasp, the smile of her younger self mocking the woman she had become, unsure, doubtful, betrayed by the very person she had built her world upon. Her body curled inward as if bracing against an invisible storm, the house around her unbearably empty despite being filled with echoes of a shared life. The next night, Emily attended a family dinner with Daniel, her unease hidden beneath polite smiles. Around the table, his relatives laughed, the air filled with clinking glasses and easy chatter. Daniel's charm was effortless, his laughter booming, his hand resting casually on her shoulder as though nothing were wrong. Yet beneath the surface, Emily's chest tightened, every joke and story sharpening her awareness of the facade. When his sister said, "You two are perfect together," Emily forced a smile, feeling her throat constrict. She thought of the message, the late-night lies, and the hollow kisses, her heart aching as she realized she was living inside a carefully constructed illusion. The house was quiet when the phone rang again, its sharp tone slicing through the night like a blade. Emily froze in the hallway, heart pounding as she listened to Daniel answer in a hushed voice. He whispered words too soft to catch, his tone gentle in a way that twisted her stomach. She pressed her back against the wall, straining to hear, her breath shallow with dread. A laugh drifted through the crack of the door, light and intimate, not the laughter he gave her anymore. She covered her mouth, whispering to herself, "Who is she?" Her hands shook as anger warred with fear, her chest constricting with every sound he made. When the call ended, he stepped out, startled to see her there. "Work again?" she asked, her voice brittle. He hesitated, then smirked. "You're too paranoid, Emily." The words struck like knives, leaving her hollow and furious. The next day, Emily searched the laundry basket, her hands trembling as she unfolded his shirt. A receipt slipped out, crumpled but legible. Dinner for two at a downtown restaurant she'd never been to. Her pulse raced as she clutched it, whispering, "You lied to me." The neat handwriting of the waiter's note at the bottom, "See you again soon," burned into her eyes. She imagined Daniel smiling across a table, not meant for her, his laughter filling someone else's night. Anger rose, fierce and choking, colliding with the deep ache of betrayal. She stuffed the receipt into her pocket, her resolve hardening with each heartbeat. When Daniel entered moments later, she hid it quickly, forcing a smile. "Everything okay?" he asked lightly. Emily nodded, voice shaking, of course. Inside, she was a storm, ready to break. That night, Daniel mumbled in his sleep, a name spilling from his lips like a dagger. "Sophie." Emily's eyes snapped open, her chest tightening as though the sound had stolen her breath. She whispered the name back softly, testing its weight in the dark. Tears burned at her eyes as she watched him sleep, his face peaceful, betraying nothing of the storm tearing her apart. She wanted to shake him awake, demand answers, but fear of the truth held her still. Instead, she lay rigid beside him, heart hammering, mind spiraling with images of another woman. The silence stretched endlessly, every second amplifying her torment. She whispered to herself, "I'm losing him." And in that whisper, she knew she had already lost more than she could bear. The following morning, Emily picked up Daniel's phone when he left it charging on the counter. Her heart pounded, sweat slick on her palms as she scrolled through messages, most deleted, conversations cut short. One thread remained, filled with vague goodbyes and half-hidden tenderness. She whispered, "Why erase so much if there's nothing to hide?" Her stomach twisted as she read fragments, the truth dangling just out of reach. The sound of footsteps made her jolt, shoving the phone back as Daniel entered, his gaze sharp. "Looking for something?" he asked coolly. Emily forced a shaky smile, her voice fragile, "Just checking the time." His smirk cut through her, heavy with unspoken accusation, and she felt the walls of her reality collapse further inward. That evening, Emily confronted him, voice trembling but fierce. "Who is Sophie?" she demanded, the name burning like fire. Daniel froze, then laughed dismissively. "You're imagining things." Her heart cracked at the cruel dismissal, her fears brushed aside like dust. "I heard you say it in your sleep," she insisted, tears blurring her vision. His jaw tightened, anger flashing as he snapped, "Stop acting crazy." The words shattered her, twisting truth into doubt, making her question her own mind. Emily clutched her chest, whispering, "You're tearing me apart." The silence that followed was suffocating, filled with lies she could no longer ignore. His eyes were cold, his mask of patience cracking, and she realized the war for truth had only just begun. The knock on the door was unexpected, sharp against the quiet of the afternoon. Emily froze, heart quickening as Daniel moved toward it, his jaw tightening in a way that made her chest constrict. When he opened the door, a young woman stood there, holding a small child by the hand. Her face was pale, eyes searching, voice trembling as she asked, "Daniel, are you coming home tonight?" The words sliced through Emily like shattered glass. Daniel's face drained of color, his practiced mask faltering for the first time. Emily stepped forward, her voice unsteady. "Who is she, Daniel?" The child clung to the woman's skirt, wide-eyed and silent. Emily's stomach twisted as reality shifted violently beneath her. The woman's lips trembled as she whispered, "I'm his wife." Emily's world spun, the air sucked from the room, betrayal wrapping around her like chains. Daniel snapped, "This isn't what it looks like," but the lie rang hollow in the heavy silence. Emily staggered backward, her body trembling as though the floor beneath her had vanished. "Wife?" she whispered, the word catching like shards in her throat. The woman stepped inside, her grip tightening on the child's hand, her eyes flickering between Emily and Daniel. "He told me you were dead," she said quietly, anger trembling beneath her sorrow. Emily's knees nearly gave way, her vision blurring as she tried to process the impossible. Daniel's face twisted with desperation, his words spilling out, "I can explain. This isn't what you think." Emily's voice cracked into fury, "It's exactly what I think." The air between them vibrated with betrayal, the lies unraveling faster than he could contain. The child clutched closer to his mother, eyes wide, absorbing a storm he couldn't understand. Emily's chest burned, her hands clenched at her sides, the world collapsing in front of her eyes. Emily snatched the stack of papers the woman produced from her purse, her fingers trembling as she unfolded them. Legal documents, marriage certificates, mortgage papers, photos of vacations with Daniel smiling arm in arm with another family. Her voice cracked. "You've built another life, another home, while lying in my bed." Daniel reached for her, desperation bleeding through his facade. "Emily, please, I never meant to hurt you." She shoved him back, fire surging through her veins. "You didn't just hurt me, you destroyed me." The other woman's eyes brimmed with unshed tears, her voice soft but cutting. "He destroyed us both." Emily's breath came ragged, the room closing in, betrayal cementing itself as undeniable truth. Her hands shook as the papers slipped to the floor, scattering like ashes of everything she once believed. The walls seemed to close in, Emily's breathing ragged as Daniel tried to speak, his words falling like stones in water. "I had no choice," he insisted, his voice trembling with anger and desperation. Emily's fury erupted. "No choice. You chose to live two lives. You chose to make me a fool." Tears streamed down her face as her body shook with every word. The woman stepped closer, her voice sharp. "He's been lying to both of us for years." Daniel's mask cracked completely, his hands shaking, his voice breaking. "I thought I could keep it together. I thought I could give both of you everything." Emily's scream cut through the air, raw and piercing. "You gave us nothing but lies." The child began to cry, his small voice breaking through the chaos, a haunting echo of innocence shattered by truth. The silence that followed was suffocating, heavy with truths that could never be buried again. Emily fell to her knees, clutching her chest as sobs tore through her body, her world unrecognizable. Daniel reached out, but she recoiled violently, her voice hoarse. "Don't touch me." The other woman's face hardened, her hand tightening around the boy's shoulder. "We're leaving," she said firmly, her words final. Daniel's eyes darted wildly, fear and fury clashing as he realized control had slipped through his grasp. Emily raised her tear-streaked face, her voice low but sharp as glass. "You've lost everything, Daniel. Both worlds are gone." The weight of her words filled the room. Undeniable. Irreversible. The door slammed shut behind the woman and child, leaving Daniel standing in ruins, his double life torn open. Emily remained on the floor, broken yet burning with a new fire, the taste of betrayal sharp and unforgettable. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the storm rattling the windows. Emily stood in the living room, her body shaking as Daniel paced before her, desperation etched in his face. "You don't understand," he shouted, his voice raw. "I tried to protect you." Her laugh cracked like glass, bitter and sharp. "Protect me? You buried me in lies." The rain pounded harder, echoing the chaos inside. Daniel's hands clenched into fists, his mask torn away, his charm replaced by frantic rage. Emily's voice rose, trembling with fury. "You stole years of my life, and for what? To play husband twice over?" The storm outside roared, but the storm inside was louder, two worlds colliding with no return. Daniel's voice cracked as he grabbed the coffee table, hurling it aside, glass shattering against the floor. "I gave everything for you," he roared, veins straining in his neck. Emily recoiled but refused to back down, her chest heaving with fury. "You gave me nothing but betrayal," she screamed, pointing at him with trembling hands. The walls seemed to vibrate with the force of their words, every syllable dripping with years of buried poison. Her tears fell freely, not of weakness, but of a heart tearing itself open. Daniel's face contorted, torn between rage and shame, yet still clinging to the lies. The storm outside rattled louder, wind pushing against the house as though even nature wanted it to collapse. Emily's voice lowered to a deadly calm, her body trembling but her words razor-sharp. "Do you even love me?" she demanded, her eyes burning into him. Daniel froze, his mouth opening but no answer coming, silence more damning than confession. She stepped closer, her fury radiating like fire. Or was I just another role you played? His jaw tightened, his fists unclenched, and for the first time his face crumbled, the mask gone completely. I don't know anymore, he whispered, broken, and the words tore through her like knives. Emily's scream was raw, guttural, her hands pounding against his chest as he staggered back. The storm outside seemed to mirror her pain, thunder rolling like an endless drumbeat of grief. Daniel shoved her hands away, his eyes blazing now with unleashed fury. I had to do it, he shouted, veins bulging. Emily staggered back, voice cracking. You destroyed 2 families because you're too cowardly to choose. Her words echoed through the room, heavy with truth. He grabbed a chair, slamming it down, splinters flying as his rage devoured him. Emily pressed against the wall, tears streaming, yet she refused to look away. You don't get to break me, she whispered, her voice trembling but unyielding. Daniel's chest heaved, sweat glistening on his forehead, the stormlight casting him in jagged shadows. For the first time, he looked less like a man, and more like a cornered beast, his double life collapsing in violent pieces. The storm peaked as Emily rose from the wall, her voice rising above the thunder. You don't own me anymore, she shouted, her strength blazing through the tears. Daniel's shoulders sagged, his fury flickering into hollow defeat. He dropped to his knees, breath ragged, his voice breaking. I never wanted to lose you. Emily's eyes hardened, the love she once carried burning away to ash. You lost me the moment you lied, she said, each word heavy with finality. The storm rattled the windows one last time, thunder booming like a closing curtain. Emily turned, walking toward the door, her steps steady despite the weight of her shattered heart. Behind her, Daniel collapsed into silence, the ruins of his double life surrounding him like a cage. The storm passed, leaving the house heavy with silence, broken furniture scattered like bones of their love. Emily sat on the couch, her hands trembling as she whispered, It's over. The words didn't bring peace, only a hollow ache echoing inside her chest. The air smelled of rain and broken wood, and the quiet pressed against her like a weight she couldn't lift. She stared at Daniel slumped on the floor, his head bowed, his shoulders sagging under the ruin he created. You took everything from me, she said softly, her voice cracked but steady. He looked up, eyes wet, no words left to spin. For the first time, he had no mask, no defense, only a broken man revealed in his own destruction. Morning came slow, sunlight creeping across the floor as though afraid to touch the ruins. Emily walked barefoot through the quiet house, each step echoing louder than the last. Her eyes lingered on photos of smiles now tainted by lies, frames tilted from the chaos of the night. She whispered, all those years wasted, her throat tightening with grief. Yet in her chest, something steadier flickered. An ember of survival. Daniel still sat silent in the corner, watching her with hollow eyes, but she no longer looked at him for answers. She pressed her hand against the doorframe, breathing deeply, letting the truth settle like sharp stones underfoot. Later, Emily sat at her sister Claire's kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug that offered little comfort. Claire's eyes searched hers, voice trembling. I'm so sorry. Emily's gaze stayed fixed on the rising steam, her voice hoarse. I thought love was enough. Tears welled, but she blinked them back, not wanting to collapse again. Claire reached across the table, squeezing her hand. You don't have to do this alone. The warmth of the touch broke something inside her, and Emily allowed her tears to fall freely. He had another family, she whispered, words heavy, final. Claire's grip tightened, her own tears spilling, as silence filled the room, heavy with grief but edged with quiet solidarity. That evening, Emily stood in her bedroom, suitcase open on the bed, clothes folded in trembling hands. Her heart felt heavy, but her mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, his face pale, his voice cracking. Don't leave. She froze, her breath sharp, then turned with eyes burning. You left me a long time ago. His lips parted, but no words came, only silence that filled the space between them like poison. She zipped the suitcase slowly, each sound final, each motion a severing of the chains that bound her. For once, she felt control return, fragile but real, and it gave her the strength to face him without breaking. Emily walked into the night air, suitcase in hand, the cool breeze brushing against her damp cheeks. The street was quiet, rainwater glistening on the pavement, lamps casting golden pools of light. She paused at the gate, turning to see Daniel framed in the doorway, a shadow of the man she once loved. "Goodbye," she whispered, her voice steady, not for him but for herself. She turned away, each step heavy yet freeing, carrying the weight of loss and the fragile spark of rebirth. Behind her, the house loomed like a tomb of shattered promises, but ahead, the road stretched open, endless. The silence of the night embraced her, no longer suffocating but full of possibility. Emily returned one last time, not for reconciliation but for closure. She stepped into the house, the air heavy with the stale scent of broken promises. Daniel stood waiting, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. "You came back," he murmured, voice brittle. Emily met his gaze, her own eyes steady now, no longer clouded by fear. "I came to say goodbye properly," she said, each word sharp and deliberate. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating, until Daniel whispered, "I never stopped loving you." She shook her head slowly, a faint tear slipping down her cheek. "You don't get to call that love." Daniel reached for her hand, but Emily stepped back, her body trembling with restraint. "Please, Emily," he begged, voice cracking. "Don't leave me in this emptiness." She swallowed hard, her throat tight, but her will unbroken. "You built this emptiness," she replied, her tone cold as steel. His hand hovered in the air, then dropped limply to his side, the weight of rejection settling on his frame. For the first time he looked small, fragile, a man consumed by the ruins he created. Emily's chest ached, but her heart no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the part of herself he could never break. As Emily turned to leave, a figure stepped into the doorway, the woman from before, her child clinging to her leg. Her presence cut through the air like a blade. She looked at Emily, her eyes heavy with sorrow but lined with strength. "He doesn't deserve either of us," she said firmly, her voice steady. Emily nodded, her throat tightening as their pain intertwined like a mirror. The boy's innocent eyes lifted toward Emily, full of questions he couldn't ask. For a fleeting moment, she saw her own brokenness reflected in his. She whispered, "You'll be okay," more to herself than to him. The other woman's lips quivered, but she nodded, sealing their unspoken bond. Daniel collapsed into a chair, his head buried in his hands, his body shaking with silent sobs. The soundless despair filled the room more heavily than any words could. Emily stood by the door, watching him crumble, but felt no urge to comfort him. Her voice was low, trembling but certain. "This is the life you chose." He lifted his head, eyes red, lips trembling as if to argue, but nothing came. The silence cut deeper than screams, a silence that sealed his fate. Emily's hand tightened around the doorknob, her pulse steady. For the first time, she felt the power shift entirely into her hands. Emily opened the door, the night air brushing against her face like freedom itself. She stepped into the darkness, her suitcase rolling behind her, her shoulders straight despite the weight of her grief. Daniel's voice rose faintly behind her. "A final broken plea, Emily." She paused at the gate, her body still, her heart heavy. Slowly, she turned her head just enough for her words to carry back. "I was real," she said softly, her voice cutting deeper than any scream. Then she walked away, leaving the house, the lies, and the man who had destroyed her, each step echoing like the final toll of a bell.